Welcome to the next episode of the Axe Academy. Suicide. Hope. The numbers, the stats, the people, the stories. It's been tossed around like a viral photo on the internet. It's one of these moments in our time where I am convinced that we need hope. Now in 2016 alone, 44,965 recorded suicides. That's up an increase from 1999 to 2014 of 24%, and it is on the rise. It's the highest rate recorded in 28 years, and we read these numbers, we hear these stats, we see these reports on the different ways that we ingest media, and then there is Alex, or the person you know, or the person rather you knew. And the stats become people, and all of those numbers become a person. And then we're wondering, we're asking, we're looking for hope. I'm convinced that hope must be in our heads, in our hands, and in our hearts. You see, if hope is only in our hands, then we're working for hope, but we're thinking and truly living from the heart, hopeless. If hope is only in our heart, then thinking is a battle, and hope is not practice. If it's only in the head, hope is a mentality, something we desire but do not have ourselves, and thus we do not practice it, or even better, become it. Let's talk about hope and how we can see it in these three spheres of our life, specifically in the issue of suicide and the hopelessness that comes with it, and what our response can be to someone who has thought about it, and maybe someone who's experienced the wake of the aftermath of this hopelessness. Grab that axe, let's swing away. This is a topic that I'm handling, I guess, with the utmost respect. Humility, a little bit of trepidation, and apprehension. I recently went to a funeral where a very close personal friend lost a loved one. And as I said, all of these things we talk about, when they become people, then it becomes real, or at least apparent of the reality that is so true. Couple quick announcements before we dive into this. I want to tell you about a path to an axe that's available for you to check out. It's a 1 to 2 year process. It's a guided learning process through a number of required readings, axe courses, and then one-on-one Skype interviews with me. You actually will walk through this path, checking off your progress as you go, and then at the end of it, I ship you a hatchet, an axe in the mail, engraved with the mission, vision, the verse from Kings, and your name on the handle. A great addition to not only remember the journey that you are on, but to invite others to find the axe that they must possess to build into blaze what God has for them. This month, use the word hope for a free month in the Axe Academy. When you go to check out the Axe Academy, if you are not a part of the Axe Academy, then use the keyword or the phrase or the coupon code HOPE and get a free month on us and just check it out. We were going to be doing a Axe webinar that will be free for you to check out as well around the issue of hope. Look out for details on social media and our mailing list for more information as that comes. I want to thank Feed One as our partner. And remember, any new Axe members in July and August, we feed a child in the developing world for a month on your behalf. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention kicked out some numbers. Men die by suicide 3.57 more times than women. White males account for 7 out of 10 suicides. And among people middle-aged from 45 to 54, the rate has actually decreased. The second highest rate of the category of those is 85 years and older. But of all the age groups, it increased, especially in what you could consider the millennial generation. For these young people from the ages of 15 to 24, the suicide rate is almost 14 deaths per 100,000. we need hope. And I'm telling you, hope must be in our hands, in our heads, in our hearts. I'm convinced that there's this reality where all three of them play into our own reality. I mean, even in our hands, with 9 feet of blood vessels per square inch and 29 major and minor bones. Our hands have 48 nerves and 123 ligaments. Your hand is truly unique. It's one of the most complex parts of the human. And they're all tattooed on all of our hands. Yes, even yours. Look at your hands right now, and you don't see it, but what it really says on one hand or the other, if you have both of your hands and all 4 of your fingers written on the knuckles of all of those hands and all of those fingers, not always seen by our eyes, are 2 words. On one hand, you have hope, and another, you have fear. 2 contrasting, 2 battling realities, 2 choices that we all have to make, things we're going to grab a hold of with our hands. Jesus met a man. I love the story about the man with the crippled hand in Mark 3, or you can find it in Luke 6. And tattooed on his knuckles, in a sense, was hope and fear. And Jesus said to that man, "Stretch out your hand." Now, what I find interesting about this is the man had to decide which hand would he hide. The one with fear or the one that needed hope? Think about that. When the Christ asks him to stretch out his hand, he's got one that he knows is crippled, one that is a mark on his life, and the other that's worked fine and just sort of been normal like everybody else. So stretch out your hand, and what you'll find is this: our hands in a resting position when the blood vessels, bones, nerves, sinews all in submission, is the perfect position to do one of 2 actions: grab hold or let go. And which will you choose? And what will we decide? To hold on or to let go? To fear or to hope? And you need to know this: hope always grabs hold. And like a paradox, hope also lets go. But fear, I have found that fear makes fists. Fear puts those dukes up because fear hides hands. So grab hold of hope. Stretch out that hand and let it go. I love what Mark Twain says: go out on that limb, because that's really where the fruit is. That was me reciting some lines from the Hope Mosaic, specifically speaking to the issue or the area of hope interplaying with our hands. And I am convinced that when it comes to our hands and how we practice hope with them, hope is something that we become, not something we necessarily pray for. Hope is like that is practiced. It's like we become these hope practitioners, where we're out there practicing hope. We're out there making hope happen, being hope, stretching out that hand, walking by those people with those crippled hands and saying, "Stretch out that hand." No, not the good one, the one that you're ashamed of, the one that nobody wants to see. I'm convinced that hope must be something that we practice in our hand, and we as people who are looking for hope must continually stretch out the crippled hand to the maker and to the healer of that hand. Hope grabs hold, hope lets go, but fear makes fists. Now, we also have to have this reality in our heart. The heart's got 4 compartments and many valves, and it's constantly in motion. It's even a symbol of emotion. That little emoticon that we send that says how we feel about that person in that moment. It's an icon, but it's both keeping us alive. It's way more than just a muscle, way more than just flesh to be weighed. Now, One thing I've noticed as a father, when your children roam, your heart now has legs. It leaves your chest and it walks about. Well, when you found your spouse, your destiny is found, and then your heart is not your own, and it's held ransom by trust. Your heart. It's something that's always able to be broken, while yet in the brokenness still remain beating. So each heart, no matter how strong or which one, can get sick. I'm convinced that the emotional heart and the physical heart both can have a disease. And Solomon, a wise king, once said in a fog of wisdom, hopes deferred make the heart sick, in Proverbs 18 verse 21, and I think he's right. That truth cannot be evaded, that hopes that are deferred, that are not yet here, they can make us sick. And our deferred realities have made us sick. Things that we hope for that are just out of our reach are like poison, like lead in our veins, which constantly flows to our emotional heart. And our physical heart gets sick in the process. And the reality is, we all deal with these new realities along the way. It's the new normal humans have a hard time embracing. And this leads to a lot of disappointment from what was, and the old and the new, but they're both now deferred. And Solomon was right. Those deferred hopes make us sick. See, having a new reality in a broken heart without hope is far more difficult than just having a new reality. I love what Da Vinci says, tears come from the heart, not the brain. So in my experience, as frankly as I can state it, what defers our hope in our hearts is our inability to brace into a new reality, to lean in after the tragedy and move forward from it. It's like this breaking free from the old one. Like the old reality is what keeps us deferred. And we want to go back to the way things were. And the truth is the way things are, is the windshield is much bigger than the rear view mirror. And the shock of it, sometimes the weight of it, the grief of it, it all keeps us looking back. But I'll simply say that grief is not a roadblock from where you want to go. It's most times the roadway to it. And along that path, the new normal takes hold. And I think this is why Solomon finished that phrase, but the longing fulfilled is a tree of life. The reality is when we embrace reality after a tragedy, it becomes a longing fulfilled. And we find the tree of life again. And there, hope can never let us go. So defer your heart no longer and become stronger and embrace what holds you, and hope will find you there, curled up in a ball, defenseless and alone, full of fear, but hope will find you there. You see, this heart must beat in the new reality. That's hope. When we're practicing hope in our hands and we're beating from hope in our hearts, embracing the reality along the way, there's this other roadblock that's called our head. And no other location holds all the senses. It's a one-stop shop for them all. There's the hearing and touch and taste and smell and sight, all there in that head. And all the senses are miraculous in their own right. But arguably, in my opinion, none more than sight. Rods, cones, this thing called vitreous humor, photoreceptor cells encased in a movie screen in the back of your head. It's absolutely amazing how they all work together under perfect pressure, capturing life. but as simply stated as possible, eyes see. Your eyes can see because of light. And so what light are we looking on that's feeding our heads? Because it matters. And Jesus said in the book of Matthew, the eye is a lamp to the body. And if your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. How we see matters, but what we look at matters. So what if you could see into the future? What if you could look at light like that, beyond the hopeless moments? If you could peer into the time machine that's your life, what kind of light would that look like? I think it would look like this. Hey, it's you. I wanted to tell you a few things that you need to know. In 10 years from now, you would know. And in that place, you would see. Life is like that. That's that kind of light. Hope is easy once you understand. And to understand is just to simply see the right light. You remember that moment where you watched, thought, cried from that out-of-control tragedy, from the things that you chose tragically? You felt hopeless. And at some point, hope left you. But you need to know a few things, see a few things. Your life has been so great. There is a greater light ahead. You become so much more than you thought in that hopeless moment. I have seen it. The things with your parents, the big breakup. I wish you could see what I see. That school, when you felt worthless, when your spouse left, when you lost your job, when your kids grew out of you. When plan A turned into plan B and then plan C, I wish I could blink you there and let you stand in that light. For you now have your own story of hope, and your vision is 2020 here. You're past the fog of pain, so open your eyes in this moment to get to the new one. Look at the light, not the dark. So I guess I'll say goodbye for now. Me. With open eyes, you watch, but with eyes of hope, I think we really see. I am convinced that we must look at the light. Now, shifting gears, I just want to simply offer up, this is the one place that the eyes or the head or the hands and what we put them to, the heart and how it beats in the realities that we walk through. One area in our life statistically that's in the news, that's raging havoc on this generation is suicide. There is this increase that has been the highest that we have seen ever in the history of humanity since we've been tracking this thing called suicide. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why. And I'll just say, if you are struggling, or if you have thought, or if you're in a place of hopelessness, I want you to write this number down. It's 1-800-273-8255. Or you can go to d2lrevolution.com, death2liferevolution.com. It's a friend of mine. He runs a ministry. They have a no suicide zone. People, you can hit the chat button. You can call the number. You can ask for help. There's a national suicide prevention hotline. That number is 800-273-8255. If you are in that place of hopelessness, you must start practicing hope with your hands. You must start embracing reality into the new one with your heart. And we must look on the light with our heads and our eyes. So call that number, hit that chat, talk to that friend or that pastor or that loved one or that significant other or that person you know is a safe place. I want to go through a couple reasons in the close of this AXECast before we get into the extended AXECast. I want to just lay out a couple reasons why people, according to the reading that I've been doing, are actually thinking about taking their own life. There's 6 of them specifically, and then I want to give you some reasons of how to sort of engage culture through maybe reasons why or why not, or just sort of the idea of how we can meet someone right at the, I guess, place where they're at and bring them where they need to be if they're struggling with this thing called suicide. People commit suicide for a couple different reasons. The number one reason that I found out there in the readings and journals, both in the psychiatric community and just sort of the medical community, and obviously the faith community, and all of those communities working together as pillars that hold up this whole thing called truth, they're depressed. Without question, that's one of the most common reasons. Severe depression is usually accompanied by this idea that we gotta escape this hopelessness. It's a way that a human reaction takes place where we want to get out of our pain. The second reason that I found is sometimes they're suffering from a mental illness. There's these inner voices that are telling them to self-destruct. Mental illness is a very serious thing in our day, and for me, it's a little bit of a challenge because when my son or daughter or my other son or a friend of mine has a cut on their arm or they break their leg or it's a physical ailment, those things are very easy to see. I mean, it's clearly apparent. You have something wrong with your leg. When you are dealing with mental illness, those things sometimes aren't so apparent. That's a challenge. The third reason is sometimes it's often related to drugs and alcohol, or they're just become impulsive. And so like the inebriated or the altered state of the person makes the decision and not the person themselves. They made a mistake. There's a recent sort of tragic idea that they screwed up and there's really no way to get out of it. The fifth reason, I think, is that they're crying out for help and they're really not sure how to get it. They don't really know where to turn. They've asked for help and the people that they've turned to have not helped. And so they're just not sure how to resolve this on their own. And then the sixth, which kind of would round out my top six from being depressed, suffering from mental illness, an altered state of impulsiveness with drugs or alcohol, this cry for help, this idea of making a mistake, and this is the only way to fix it. I would really put this last one in underneath the category of a traumatic event or stress. A person who's had a traumatic experience, we could go through the list of abuse, physical abuse, war. I mean, among soldiers in the Wounded Warrior Project, these guys come back with major trauma and PSD and all of these traumatic stressors or events that cause these stressors really ramp up the risk for suicide years, sometimes even decades after the trauma. It's this imprint that they can never actually shake, which is untrue. I think there's a way through. So these are 6 reasons for you to really understand this idea about suicide in this, well, I guess concept of why someone would be thinking about it. So let's jump to some practical applications or thoughts or metaphors about how when we are listening to someone or if someone who has sort of committed trust to us about their thoughts about suicide, or we have a hunch that one of our loved ones is dealing with one of these 6, or a kid at our school or a person we work with, let's talk a little bit about some of the words that can create a reality for when we're engaging culture around this issue or an individual or a person that's across the table at the booth or in the theater or in a parking lot, and they just drop the bomb on you that they're thinking about harming themselves in that way. I want to talk a few metaphors through, and then for the extended Acts episode, I want to give you the biblical perspective in our response beyond some of these metaphors when it comes to specifically, putting rubber to the road. But let's talk about a few reasons why not. Life is a chemical roller coaster. That's the first thing that I want to establish with anybody that I'm talking with about this issue, that's dealing with this issue. Life is a chemical roller coaster that's ups and downs. There's these moments where literally chemically in our body there are things that are sound, things that are not sound. There's vitamin D deficiency that impacts most of Alaska in the middle of winter in these native communities where they don't see the sun. Yes, part of the problem is more, let's just say, specific about than just some sort of natural phenomenon where there isn't light. But a lot of the problem that exists is there is no sun in that place for an extended period of time, and with no sun, no vitamin D, and then your body becomes this chemical roller coaster. Our bodies are these machines that have this divine blueprint, and there's ups and downs chemically within us. And David writes like this. First of all, I think that if people go, something's wrong with me because I'm up and down a lot, first of all, I think you're 100% normal. I think we are emotional beings, and we have these emotions for a reason. Get a Bible if you have a chance and read Psalm 22 and then read Psalm 23. And you will see the stark reality between the two realities that are created. Psalm 22, my bones are out of joint. My heart feels like wax. My strength is dried up within me. The roof of my mouth, my tongue cleaves to. A band of evildoers encircle me. They lay me down I'm just quoting just a couple thoughts that come to mind. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He leads me beside these pastures that are green. Think about the difference when you read those two chapters that we've put in that chapter form of Scripture. But don't forget, the same guy wrote those. Like the same person wrote Psalm 22 to Psalm 23. King David had a chemical roller coaster. You're normal if you have ups and downs. The second metaphor that I would want to unpack with somebody is real simple in the form of a question. Is the rear view mirror in a car larger or smaller? It's smaller. The windshield is the larger. The rear view mirror is smaller. I would want to talk with that person and just simply remind them that the best part of our life is still ahead of us. The windshield is bigger than the rear view mirror. Keep looking forward. A third metaphor that I like to use when I'm speaking with someone who's dealing with this is I like to have them think about their life as a book or a movie. Anytime you read a book and you get to a chapter that doesn't make sense, you got to get through that chapter for the book to continue. If you watch a movie and halfway through the movie you're sort of lost, it's like until the end of the movie, then everything makes sense. If you've never seen the movie Inception, first of all, if you're not allowed to watch those rated, I guess, R or PG-13, I don't even know what it is. But the point is ask permission. That's just a disclaimer for those of you that are students there. But the point is when you watch a movie like The Matrix or something where you feel lost half of it, and then the ending of it clears everything up and you go, I get it. Your life is just like that book or just like that movie. You're in hard chapters, hard scenes, but when you get a little further down the road, some things can make a lot more sense. The more you watch, the more you read. Stay in the theater. Don't take yourself out of the theater. Keep reading those pages. Keep flipping those sheets of paper. That's your life. Life's like a book or a movie. I think there's beautiful moments that people have that are ahead of them that they got to be there to witness them. It just doesn't end like that. I really love this because I think it's helpful. I've said this to a lot of people through the years that not everything happens for a reason, but God can make reasons for everything. I have found that when we start saying, oh, this happens for a reason, that's cliche and unhelpful for people, especially the greater the tragedy. I think things are just a damn tragedy and they can't or be reasoned with. They can only be carried. And that's what Jesus does with us. And further, God can make reasons for anything, and not everything happens for some sort of reason. Think about a river cutting a path through the Grand Canyon. The river decides where it's going to go. It does what it does. But then yet there's this beautiful structure that exists after the river's done with its torment. Another metaphor that I just picked up from a pastor friend of mine named Pastor Rob Ketterling. He said this at a funeral around a suicide that we both were at. And he said, God promises to get us through, not out of our pain. That will stick with me for a while. That just like David writing in Psalms 23, God will get us through the pain. He journeys with us through it, not taking us out of it. God promises us to get us through the pain. So don't take yourself out of the pain. That's really what stayed with me. Hey, in the extended Acts episode, if you're not an Acts student or supporter, use the keyword HOPE and you will get a free month. But I want to talk a little bit about the biblical response in the extended Acts episode of, well, just a couple questions. Does it happen in the Bible? How does the Bible handle it? Is suicide, unforgivable? What are we supposed to do from a biblical response when it comes to people in our life and how we can get them true help? We're going to talk about that in the extended episode of the Axe Academy. But remember, hope. Hope is something that we all need in our hands, in our head, and in our hearts. And one area that these all interplay with is this issue of suicide. And if you are dealing with it or you know someone who has dealt with it, there are people that are willing to help you on d2lrevolution.com. You can chat, you can call the number 800-273-8255. There's people in your life that will be willing to speak with you and talk with you and walk with you. The reasons why we struggle with this in this generation are a number of them. I gave you 6 of them, and then a few metaphors, a few conversational pieces that help bring light into the situation in perspective when you're across the table with someone who's just dropped the bomb on you that they've been dealing with this for some time. Let's talk about the biblical perspective in the extended Acts episode. Thanks for stopping in for this latest installment of the AXECast. Remember, grab that axe, keep swinging away.